Hey everybody, Pastor Josh here in the Stronger My Nation podcast. I did a long-form podcast yesterday, and after recording it and capturing it, we realized one portion of it was really geared toward pastors, and the other portion of it was just me kind of verbally processing my time meeting with a bunch of pastors and President Trump a few days ago. And so we've split it up into two podcasts. If you're a pastor or a leader, or you have a pastor or leader you think it would benefit, you can go onto the Stronger My Nation podcast and send that podcast to them. And I just basically unpack why pastors should care about this election and some things I heard from the National Faith Advisory Board that I think are very exciting. And so that's all in that podcast. This podcast is just going to be me kind of verbally processing how I'm thinking about this election. As a 45-year-old man who's got 4 kids, fully invested in my local community and in my community, in my state, and my nation being better than when I found it, what I can the kind of the social inheritance I can hand to my kids and my obligation to participate in that. So this is going to just be kind of verbally processing my time in Atlanta. My wife and I flew back with Pastor Mark and Grace Driscoll and met with Pastor John Lovell and his wife Becca, and the 6 of us went and got to spend some time with a bunch of pastors listening to Trump kind of talk and process about his story, as well. Pastor Mark got to meet him backstage and have some stories from that. So again, me verbally processing how I'm thinking about biblical political theory in relationship to this election, these politics, these candidates, the policies that are on the table, and why I am choosing to vote a certain way. And again, this really isn't for kind of the Trump sycophants. This isn't for, the Harris big. This is really me talking to those who are on the fence, Christians who are struggling, wrestling with a good conscience. I want to do the right thing as a believer. I hear you. I'm very empathetic towards your position. And this is just me talking to you, if you're in my living room, about how I'm thinking about these things and why I'm going to make the choice that I'm going to make. So hope you find it helpful. And if not, hey, it's free. So what can I say? Hope you enjoy. What I want to walk through next is just reasons that I've jotted down as to why I, as a thinking human being who's 45 years old and has a mortgage and 4 kids and is very actively involved in my community and has a vested interest in seeing our communities thrive. Here's why why I'm going to vote for Donald Trump, and you can consider. You may disagree with them, that's totally fine, but I'd love for you to consider them if you're wrestling with which way to go. Number one, I think Donald Trump recognizes the importance of church and pastors and established religion, as I've just spent the last 15 minutes arguing. This is interesting. Paula White, who was interviewing him, I think was attempting to get him to be more explicit in how he describes his relationship with Jesus, and he just didn't go there, and that didn't bother me, and here's why. It was very obvious that he wasn't trying to pander to the room. There are buzz phrases he could have used. There are things he could have said that would have been, kind of like, okay, he's using our language, and he didn't. That tells me he's not there trying to pander to us. He's there just verbally processing where he's honestly at in the moment, and I appreciate that. And what was clear is that he has an awareness of God. He has a healthy respect and fear of God and his moral law. He is becoming increasingly where he believes that God's hand is upon him, not in a God-like complex, but in a, hey, I recognize where I've gotten is a result of the grace of God and not just my own strength and wisdom. And so there's a very humble, I think, acknowledgement of God's hands upon him. And there's a willingness and a desire to work with religious leaders. He said multiple times, what you do matters. We need more religion in our country, not less. We need more pastors and churches speaking freely on issues, not less. And one of his first acts, he said he wants to bring the office of faith, religious freedom back into the White House so we can have them there. And then they gave a stat. I won't remember it or quote it accurately, so I'll just say here the sum of it was, Donald Trump has had more faith leaders through the Oval Office than any president in recent memory. I appreciate that about that man. Number 2, he recognizes the value of family. It's crazy. Married 3 times, I think. First wife was kind of crazy, maybe gold hunting. Second wife divorced. When his former wife speaks of him, she speaks very highly of him and has a lot of respect for him. She's like full MAGA, which that's interesting. His current wife, who I believe he loves dearly, is faithful to. And then he's got kids that adore him. And he was asked, how do you raise kids how you've raised? And he's like, well, it's very simple. I tell them every day, no drugs, no alcohol, no cigarettes. Pretty good, really great information. And he just stuck on that for like 50 minutes. It was super funny. But it was very clear he cared about his kids. He loves them. and they love him. And that matters to me. He values the family. He values protecting the family. He thinks men should be leaders and providers. He has a high value of wives and mothers and women. So I appreciate that about him. Number 3, he values hard work and giving people opportunities to succeed. People think that he is bombastic and self-centered and egomaniacal and narcissistic, and maybe he is all of those things. I think he's an entertainer. I think he's got a big personality. And what's very obvious to me is he loves promoting people around him. I'm not a clinical psychologist, but I don't think narcissistic behavior includes promoting and elevating people around you and surrounding yourself by smarter people that you might be intimidated with. I just think he's got a really clear sense of who he is, and he's not intimidated by bringing really smart people to the table. You look at his team right now, it's not Kamala Harris versus President Trump. It's Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump, versus Elon Musk, versus Tulsi Gabbard, versus Charlie Kirk, versus Robert Kennedy Jr., versus J.D. Vance. He's brought all of these really highly successful, competent people, and he's sharing his platform with them because I don't think he's afraid of losing attention. He's, again, a lot of people disagree with me on that, and that's totally fine. But as I observe him, I'm like, man, those aren't the tendencies of a narcissistic individual. A narcissist wants all the attention, wants all the credit, wants all the glory, and is therefore unwilling to work with other people. He has demonstrated time and again a willingness to work with people, bring really smart people to the table. And you just hear it in his interviews. He's so proud of people when they succeed. You're doing a great job. You're really great. That's a great outfit. That's a great organization. This guy's the best. People take that as stupid and unintelligent and bombastic. I take it as he's just kind of eternally optimistic, and he wants everyone around him to succeed. He is really vested in the lives of people around him, that they would do well. And I find that very endearing in a leader. Number 4, he elevates those around him. I said that. Number 5, I wrote down he's humble, and probably no one will agree with me on that, and that's totally fine. But when I think about what I've accomplished and then what I talk about publicly in comparison to what he's accomplished and what he doesn't talk about public, I think he's probably more humble than people realize. This is a guy who's accomplished more in one lifetime than most men will accomplish in 50 lifetimes. And very rarely is he just kind of pointlessly trotting out his accomplishments. What he does love to do is win. And what he does love to do is talk about what he's done that is on a winning path. And so, maybe there's some pride in there, some narcissism in there. I'm not a clinical psychologist, and I don't know his heart. But the more I listen to him talk, the more I realize he loves to elevate people around him. He loves to see others succeed. He hates to lose. He loves to win, and he wants to help more people win. So he's always talking about, he does not let people run themselves down in his presence. He doesn't like the idea of talking in a way that puts yourself down. No, you can do better. Come on, let's go. I think he's just eternally optimistic, and I wonder if he's more humble than we think. The amount of things that have been said about him, done against him, the full force of the government alphabet soup agency of FBI, CIA, DOJ wielded against this man. If I was him, I would be raging. And I think he's remarkably forgiving. I think he's like, let's do this. He stays front sight focused on the positive things. So these are all just observations I had as I watched him. I think he genuinely loves people. He loves to get to know their story. We're hearing more and more testimonies of him paying off people's mortgages and elevating people to positions in all walks of life, all races and colors and creeds, elevating them to positions of authority. He really likes to see people succeed and win, and he's genuinely for people. I think he has a humble reverence for God that's genuine. That came out. He loves our country deeply and wants to give back. It's very clear as he talked on stage and as I've listened to interviews that he's a patriot. He loves our nation, and he wants to give back to a nation that's given so much to him, and I think that's admirable. He's consistently surrounded himself with evangelical Christians. I already mentioned that. Many evangelical Christians were there giving testimony to the fact that President Trump invited them into the Oval Office, into his life, asked, what do you think? How will these policies work? Will this help Christianity or hinder Christianity? And I don't think that's a small thing. He punishes criminals. I think that's very important, especially in the executive office. Of course, the legislative branch makes laws. The judicial branch interprets laws, and the executive branch is there to enforce laws. I think he is very clear on criminals and lawbreakers and draws a hard line, which I think aligns itself with righteous justice. He just recently talked about if any illegal aliens murder an American citizen, it's death penalty, and then it's an absconding of, or a securing of their assets, if it's a drug lord, whatever it is, and then using those assets to fund and mitigate compensation for the victims of that crime. I think that's incredible. I think that is righteous justice. He's talked about a year-long jail sentence for those who are burning the flag. That's a hugely controversial thing. In a free country, you have to put up with people that don't agree with you. But man, I could get on board with that. It's like, if you're not a patriot, you don't love our country, you should go somewhere else rather than exercising such rank disrespect toward our flag. The bottom line is he is hard on crime. He's willing to identify criminals as criminals. I think that's very important. He's not using this. George Bush used illegal alien. Clinton used illegal immigrant, Obama used undocumented worker, and now Harris calls them migrants. It's like we're using this slippery progressive language to decriminalize people with our language who are breaking the law. We need to call them what they are. These are criminals, and if we aren't punishing criminals, we have no rule of law. And so he's very clear on crime and punishing criminals, and I think that's necessary in an ordered society for a rule of law to mean anything. He's committed to overturning the transing of our children and shutting down the sexual clown show. I think that is a huge moral issue that all Christians should unite on. He's very clear, no biological males in female sports. He's very clear, no sexually grooming our children through government institutions wielding this crazy demonic propaganda machine. He's very clear on that. And again, whether or not he's a card-carrying follower of Jesus, I don't know, but I believe there is a large measure of common grace on his life in how much common sense he demonstrates. He just demonstrates a lot of common sense in relationship to policy and issues of morality. He's committed to a smaller, more efficient government and reining in the just wild, irresponsible federal government that's libeling our children to a lifetime of crushing, debilitating debt. I actually like that. Some people wish that he would exercise more authority and he sends lots of things back to the states. I actually like that. I think the federal government should get smaller, not bigger, and allow more issues to be decided at the state level, because it's easier for us who live in a state to access those state politicians. It's very hard to access federal politicians, federal employees, the federal bureaucratic administrative state. Those are nameless, faceless people controlling our lives with rampant regulation that we can't get at. When he makes decisions to push things back to the states, even if I wish he would act more firmly on it himself, pushing it back to the states actually gives me, as a citizen of my state, more power and more voice to affect change on those issues, and I appreciate that. He's demonstrated. Here's a story he told that might be helpful. He talked about how just rampant, irresponsible government spending and the need to deregulate the bureaucratic administrative state, and how much money that would save us as a nation and how much freer that would make us. I could not agree more. You have no idea how much of your life is controlled by the nameless, faceless, bureaucratic state. I mean, every portion of your day has some regulation you have to adhere to that our founders would find absolutely constrictive and abhorrent, and they would have rebelled against. Our founding fathers actually had much more freedom than we do today, and we've lost the ability to be outraged about the right things, and one of them is living as free Americans on our own property, running our own businesses, these kinds of things. But here's a story about his commitment to reducing federal government and especially increasing efficiency in spending. He told a story of when he made the decision to move the American embassy to Jerusalem to help Jerusalem become, the sovereign capital of Israel. And he said that his advisors brought back, we found a piece of property, we can buy it, lock it down, build on it. And he said, how much? And they said $2 billion. And he says, $2 billion? That's crazy. Now, most politicians who've never had a job, never earned an honest dollar, never run a business or had to make payroll every month, most politicians think $2 billion, not a big deal. We'll just tax people more. We have this endless pot of money we can draw from, which is people's hard-earned tax dollars, or we'll print more money. But the businessman Trump was like, $2 billion to build an embassy? That's crazy, unacceptable. We need to find a building we can remodel for a lot less, that's in a better location, come back with better options. The next day, that same person brought back a different option and said, found a great building. It's already established. We'll do some remodeling. It's in a great location. Trump says, great, let's do it. That building became the American Embassy in Jerusalem. They remodeled it and had it up and running for $1 million in less than 6 months. The original government proposal was a $2 million build out over, I think, like 10 years. That's the kind of, and when he told that story, we broke out in applause. Thank you for saving us $2 billion that would have got spent that we didn't even know about, but that comes from our hard-earned dollars. That's an example, kind of an anecdotal example of the kind of thinking that he does. He made the note that all of our presidents have come from two groups of people, politicians or generals. We've never even had an admiral who become president. Politicians or generals. He's the first true businessman who's gotten into office, and that means he's outside the system. He's outside the pond. He's outside of the parties, which is why I think he's gotten resistance from both Democrats and Republicans, because he doesn't play ball with the establishment. Some people have said he's rewriting the Republican Party. I think that's great. The Republican Party has been doing nothing for our stated values in recent memory, and they have moved so far to the left that a Republican today will be like a liberal Democrat 20 years ago, almost unrecognizable. So in rewriting the party, I think he's actually bringing us back to some of our long-held values and beliefs. Another reason he's appointing Elon Musk to cut government waste and streamline regulatory tyranny. I think that's amazing, and like that alone is worth the vote to see what Elon Musk cut Twitter's employees by 2/3, increase profit, increase like. If he could do that with Twitter, what could he do with the government? Donald Trump is a candidate of peace. A vote for Donald Trump, I believe, is a 1-to-1 correlation to less American soldiers dying. There is like a 32 or 36-year run of constant war with a 4-year gap, and that is Donald Trump's first presidency. He adheres to Reagan's, I think it was Reagan who said, walk softly and carry a big stick. That's his philosophy. That's his political strategy. Carry a big stick and then negotiate a win-win deal so you don't have to use the big stick. He will get us out of the wars we're in, and he won't start anymore because he's not afraid to use the actual force of the American military, which actually makes us safer and more peaceful. He has an incredible work ethic. The guy has just boundless energy. His campaign pace has been incredible, 56 straight days with no stop. I think we need a president that has energy. That's important. He's very clear about protecting the border and our sovereign nation. That's massively important. He's passionate about ending the sexual grooming of our children in government schools. He talked openly about that in our meeting. He wants to eradicate the Department of Education. This is, I can hardly believe, Sean, that he says these things out loud and he's still alive. But he wants to eradicate the Department of Education that he believes, and rightly so, is in direct violation of the 10th Amendment. If you were to go and read right now the 10th Amendment and then think about all the government agencies that have been created by the federal government to control your life, you would be like, this is wild. And the Department of Education is one of those, I believe, illegal departments that explicitly violates the 10th Amendment that he wants to do away with. If President Trump was able to be elected and then survives election and actually is able to govern for 4 years, and if he was able to undo the Department of Education, that single act alone would change the destiny of millions of children for the better, without question. He also wants to see if he can federalize school choice, which would give parents the ability to make the choice where they think their child should go to educate, whether that's private or public, or homeschooling, or charter. a parent has a right, because Donald Trump believes in parental authority above government authority, to do what's best for their kids. If he was able to do that, that alone would change the destiny of millions of children and be worth voting for him in and of itself. Oh, he's committed to getting people healthy again. I don't know about you. My kids have been sick a ton the last 3 or 4 years. We can't figure out why. America in general, obesity's to the roof. We're just eating unhealthy things. Sugar is in everything. We don't know what's going into our food. Putting RFK in a position of like actual accountability for what we're eating as a nation and working toward a healthy America, I think is a remarkable commitment. As well, I've appreciated a candidacy that's actually focused on what he wants to do. To be honest, sometimes he can get kind of baited into just attacking the other side. I have found his campaign the last several months to be remarkably positive and forward-thinking as in comparison to Harris, who only talks about Trump, which is remarkable. I think he's very intelligent. I think he's authentic. The establishment is against him, which I think says a lot about who he is. It's been said somewhere by someone more famous than me, you can tell a man's character by his enemies. If that's true, who is against him tells you a lot about his character. He is one of us who is for us as the American people. And there is this fear from the establishment that he will get into office and unravel the system, to which I say, thanks be to God. We need a reset in America, and it's for the establishment to be torn to the ground, and the ownership of our nation and the keys to this nation be handed back to us as we, the people, and I appreciate that about him. I don't think you can fake courage. I've talked to enough cops and military guys to know that they say, hey, guys can talk a big game, but when a guy gets in combat and that first bullet goes by his head, that's when you find out who he really is. I've had special ops guys tell me, hey, when a guy gets shot at and he melts, there's no shame put on that man. They kind of quietly, bring him back behind the front lines and get him off of that unit and that team where he's not at the tip of the spear, because they said there's just something in a man, you either have it or you don't, that you can't control and you really can't train. It's either there or it isn't, that rises or falls when the first bullet is fired. And so there's no shame culture in special ops when a man folds in battle. They're like, hey, we get it. Let's move him back and bring up someone who can handle it. So when special op guy after special op guy steps forward and says, when that bullet went past his head and his first instinct was to stand and say, fight, fight, fight. I don't care who you are. That draws something out of you. That draws respect out of you toward that man. And I believe he's quite willing to put his life on the line. I'll speak from personal experience. This is going to sound very small because it is, but we've received threats over the years of violence towards our church or our family. And there's been times where I've been encouraged to preach in a bulletproof vest. I've never done that yet, and I don't know if I will or not, but we have a security team because we've had threats against our church. Again, nothing wildly serious. I'm not comparing myself at all to a presidential candidate. But what I am saying is I have stepped to a pulpit to preach a sermon with the thought, I wonder if there's someone in this room who wants to harm me or my family. And it's disorienting. And you have to think, do I really want to do this? And so to actually get shot at and actually know that there are people and nation states and terrorist cell groups that want to kill you and continue to get up night after night and speak boldly, it's just a remarkable demonstration of courage. I don't care who you are. Don't care what you think or believe. You have to respect that demonstration of courage. And I think it fits a man well who is running for the office of president. A lot of pressure to force Christian parents to capitulate to the wild gender ideology, that will be nowhere found in a Trump presidency. He is absolutely 100% on the side of parents parenting their children and having authority over their children, and that not being interfered with by the government. And I deeply appreciate that. So I hope that's been helpful, me kind of verbally processing for you my thoughts on this issue. Maybe I'll end with this. I've been on the phone today and yesterday with some pastors who have people on their staff and their church, on their board, who are like, I could never vote for Trump. I'm going to vote for Kamala. Here's what I would say as a Christian. I would never bind your conscience to vote for Trump. I understand people have issues with him. I get that. I would absolutely bind your conscience for voting for Kamala Harris because we know what she stands for. We know what she is trying to accomplish. She is actively, rampantly, aggressively pushing a demonic, godless agenda that is incompatible with a biblical Christian worldview. And so I would just exhort you, Christian, to consider what Jesus would say when you stand before him having supported the candidate who openly wants to murder babies. Kamala's three-pronged campaign stance are more abortions for more people, all the way to the end of a pregnancy, free porn for all, and tax-funded transgender surgeries. She wants to murder babies. She wants to bind men and women in the bondage of sexual perversion and lust, and she wants to maim and mutilate children in their bodies made in the image of God. This is open, demonic, horrific morality that must be stood against. If you were to be a person who's like, I'm going to be a no vote person, a no vote is a vote. That's what I would encourage you with. You don't have the luxury of bowing out. You need to find the moral fortitude to take a stand. And if you got to plug your nose, I totally get it. But when Jesus comes back, I want him to be very clear what side I took. It wasn't a political side. It wasn't a party side. It was a kingdom side. I'm with Jesus, and Jesus is for life at every stage. Jesus is for men and women being free from the bondage of sin and perversion and lust and addiction to pornography. Jesus is against the objectifying of men and women in pornography. And Jesus is for protecting both those children made in his image in the womb and those children made in his image outside the womb who are currently being lied to and manipulated and sexualized and groomed and then led into some of the most horrific perversions that I believe we will look back on. We are in a dark moment in history, and history will look back, and just like we look at lobotomies in the 50s and like, what were they thinking? With equal and greater horror, we will look back on this and go, what? We were chemically and surgically castrating children who aren't even old enough to get a driver's license? This is wild. This is not a nuanced election. This is not a difficult election. This is very easy. There is one candidate who is aligning himself with a biblical and moral worldview. Whether or not he's a godly man is irrelevant. His policies have demonstrated to align with the biblical worldview. And there is one candidate who is actively, publicly, aggressively aligning herself with a demonic agenda and a moral worldview that comes from the pit of hell. So, hopefully that was gentle. Hopefully that made sense. Would love to hear your comments, your thoughts. Go ahead. Feel free to put them in the comments below. We'd love to interact with you guys on this. We got 6 days to Election Day. I could not more strongly urge you as a follower of Jesus and a Christian to get out and vote. Men and women have bled and died so you could exercise this right. Don't throw it away cheaply. Handle it carefully. Handle it as a sacred privilege and get out and vote your conscience. Hope this was helpful. God bless.